Nancy Pelosi has arrived in Taiwan despite China warning of serious consequences if she visited the island. Beijing said the visit would undermine its sovereignty and security interests. The island nation is self-ruled, but China claims it as its own. We just witnessed those arrival pictures moments ago, and Joe Pike joins me now to react. But Joe, I just want to also mention we're getting some flashes of some of the headlines coming from Nancy Pelosi. She says America's solidarity with the people of Taiwan is more important today than ever. She says our discussion with Taiwan leadership will focus on reaffirming our support for our partner and on promoting our shared interest, including advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific region. She says this visit in no way contradicts long-standing United States policy, but that one line of referring to Taiwan as our partner will certainly muddy the waters because the US was meant to have a totally ambiguous position when it came to Taipai, and no doubt these sorts of comments, the arrival itself, will not help China's reaction.
Not at all. And they warned yesterday, Wilfred, of consequences if this trip were to go ahead. The highest level US visit to Taiwan for 25 years since Newt Gingrich, a previous House Speaker, in 1997. And the Chinese have kept to their word in terms of consequences. We have seen fighter jets, Chinese fighter jets flying close to the median line, that dividing line in the Taiwan Strait. We've seen army units put on high alert. And we've also heard in the last hour or so from the Chinese Foreign Ministry with a pretty strong message.
The US and Taiwan have colluded to make provocations first, and China has only been compelled to act out of self-defense. In the face of the US's unscrupulous behavior in defiance of China's repeated and serious complaints, any countermeasures China is taking will be justified and necessary. It is also the right of all independent and sovereign states.
Will be justified and necessary. What does that mean? Will there be countermeasures beyond what we've already seen in terms of these fighter jets and army units put on high alert? Certainly the real concern of the White House and of the Pentagon, of the National Security Council here in Washington, D.C., is that the Chinese could change their position on military aid for the Russians in the conflict in Ukraine. So far, Xi Jinping has not, we understand, sent any military support to help Vladimir Putin and the Russians. Of course, President Putin would be very keen to get his hands on China's very high-tech drones. The involvement of the Chinese could, of course, completely change the balance of power in that conflict. And therefore, I think the concern in the White House is that this visit from Nancy Pelosi, this arrival you're seeing here in the airport in the capital, Taipai, could anger the Chinese so much they change their position on the issue of Ukraine. Certainly, this is not a brief visit. The fact that she's visiting late at night means she's staying overnight. Newt Gingrich, 25 years ago, only stopped for a number of hours. But it's also important, I think, to point out, Wilfred, that Nancy Pelosi's views on China, her hawkishness on China, her belief in international human rights, as she would see it, is entirely consistent. She's been consistent and has strong views on this in her decades-long career on issues like Taiwan, on Hong Kong, on Tibet, on the Uyghur genocide more recently. And as she reaches the end of that career, she's 82 years old, unlikely to be the speaker long after November's midterms, I think she knows the power and significance of this visit, but also that it's effectively really one of her final chances to make a big splash and make significant headlines on the international stage.
I'll read out the statement from Nancy Pelosi in full. We brought some of the brief headlines from it moments ago, but I'll just read it out in full. She says, our congressional delegation's visit to Taiwan honours America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy. Our visit is part of our broader trip to the Indo-Pacific, including Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea and Japan, focused on mutual security, economic partnership and democratic governance. Our discussions with Taiwan leadership will focus on reaffirming our support for our partner and on promoting our shared interests, including advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific region. America's solidarity with the 23 million people of Taiwan is more important today than ever as the world faces a choice between autocracy and democracy. Our visit is one of several congressional delegations to Taiwan and in no way contradicts long-standing United States policy guided by the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, US-China joint communiques and the 6 assurances. The United States continues to oppose unilateral efforts to change the status quo. That's the end of her statement. And there's just contradictions in it, or certainly contradictions as far as the Chinese will interpret things, Joe, because they can say it no way changes the policy, but refers very clearly to the democracy of Taiwan, which is perhaps the worst word you can throw in the Chinese eyes.
It certainly is, yes. A statement full of different contradictions, but contradictions, Wilfred, that Nancy Pelosi is entirely aware of. Of course, she's got to point out that the US government's diplomatic approach hasn't changed, even if, as she knows, this visit is provocative, very provocative. It's a big win, I think, for the Taiwanese administration because it gives a signal to other countries across the world that they may be able to normalise relationships a little bit more. Maybe these visits could become a little more common. That is something the Chinese government are very keen to avoid. They see Taiwan, this self-governing island, as a breakaway province, and a breakaway province that at some stage they want to rejoin officially their nation. Nancy Pelosi's trip is very controversial. It's very provocative. It's something that many in the White House privately warned against. But she knows the impact of this visit. She's aware it's provocative. And I think she'll be pretty pleased, perhaps, with the headline she's already created, as long as it doesn't provoke such serious consequences that it changes the relationship between the US and China longer term to potentially change Chinese involvement in the war in Ukraine. That would really make this visit look like a massive mistake for Nancy Pelosi. So it's a risky endeavour, but hopefully in the next 48 hours or so, she'll get to a position where she believes it can have paid off. It is a risky strategy.